the cold barrel of a pistol pressed against her temple as Bethany Keller stared defiantly at the man who'd kidnapped her, unaware that within 24 hours she would be returned to a man she'd never met, a stranger who would change her life forever. April 1878, Montana Territory. The last wisps of winter still clung to the foothills, but spring's tender green was winning the battle across the vast expanse of ranch land belonging to Archer Quinn. The 30-year-old cattle rancher stood on his porch, hat tipped low against the morning sun, surveying the land that had been his home for the past 5 years. The cattle needed moving to higher pasture, the south fence required mending, and his newest stallion was proving difficult to break. All ordinary problems with clear solutions, unlike the letter that had arrived yesterday. "Mr. Quinn," his ranch hand, Thomas, called out as he approached from the barn. "That fella from town says he'll be here with the mail order bride, round noon tomorrow." Archer's jaw tightened. "She isn't coming, Thomas. I wrote back weeks ago, canceling the arrangement." Thomas frowned. "Well, seems the message didn't get through. The fella's mighty insistent." Archer sighed, rubbing his calloused hand across the stubble on his jaw. 6 months ago, in a moment of loneliness, he'd sent away for a bride. The harsh Montana winters had a way of making a man crave companionship, and running the ranch alone had begun to wear on him. But 2 months after sending the letter and payment, he'd changed his mind. A woman from back east wouldn't survive out here. The isolation, the hard work, the dangers. It wasn't fair to bring someone into this life who didn't understand what they were getting into. "I'll deal with it when they arrive," Archer said, settling his hat more firmly on his head. "For now, we've got work to do." As Archer mounted his horse, he pushed away thoughts of the woman who would arrive tomorrow. He'd send her back with enough money to return home. It was the right thing to do. Miles away, in the small frontier town of Copper Creek, Bethany Keller sat in the corner of a dimly lit saloon, her hands bound beneath the table, the man beside her smiling cordially at anyone who passed by. To casual observers, they might have looked like traveling companions, but the knife concealed against her ribs told a different story. "Keep smiling," Wade Wilson muttered, his voice low but threatening. "One word about who you really are, and I'll make sure you don't see morning." Bethany maintained her practiced smile, though her green eyes remained cold. 3 days ago, she'd been traveling by stagecoach from Chicago to San Francisco, planning to start a new life as a schoolteacher. The stagecoach robbery had changed everything. Wilson had separated her from the other passengers, claiming she was his wife who'd tried to run away. No one had questioned him, not with his easy charm and the gun on his hip. Now she was his captive, though she still didn't understand his plan. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, keeping her expression neutral as a barmaid passed their table. Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Because, Miss Keller, you're worth more to me as a bride than you are as a random hostage." "Bride?" She couldn't keep the horror from her voice. "Not mine," he chuckled, taking a sip of whiskey. "You see, there are men out here who pay good money for women willing to be their wives. Men who can't find women on their own. And one of them lives just outside town, a wealthy rancher named Archer Quinn." Bethany's heart raced. "I'm not for sale." "You already have been, darling. Quinn paid for a bride months ago, but the woman never showed up. The agency's representative is a friend of mine, told me all about it. Quinn's given up waiting, but he never got his money back." Wilson leaned closer. "So tomorrow, I deliver you as his mail order bride, collect the remainder of his payment, and disappear. He'll know I'm not the woman he sent for." Wilson's smile widened. "That's the beauty of it. He's never seen her. All he knows is he ordered a bride with education enough to help with the books and teach any future children. You're a schoolteacher, perfect fit. And when I tell him the truth, who would believe you? A hysterical woman making up stories about being kidnapped? Besides, once I'm gone, what difference would it make? You'd just be a woman alone in the frontier with nowhere to go." Bethany fell silent, her mind racing. She had to find a way out of the situation, but for now, she needed to stay alive and alert. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Bethany had barely slept, her wrists raw from the ropes Wilson had used to bind her to the bed in the small room above the saloon. He'd given her a simple blue dress to wear, insisting she look presentable. "Remember," Wilson said as he helped her onto the wagon, his grip painfully tight on her arm, "one word about who you really are, and I'll make sure neither of you lives to see sundown. I've got friends watching. Even if I leave, they'll finish what I start." The ride to the Quinn ranch took nearly 2 hours. With each passing mile, Bethany's anxiety grew. What kind of man had ordered a bride through the mail? Would he be cruel? Would he believe her if she told him the truth once Wilson was gone? As they approached the ranch, Bethany could see it was substantial, a large main house, several outbuildings, corrals with horses, and cattle grazing in the distance. A man worked in one of the corrals, his broad shoulders flexing as he repaired a section of fence. He turned as their wagon approached, and Bethany caught her first glimpse of Archer Quinn. He was taller than she'd expected, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. He wore no hat at the moment, and she could see his features clearly: strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes that narrowed as he watched their approach. He wasn't what she'd imagined, not some desperate, unsavory character, but a man who looked capable and self-possessed. Wilson helped her down from the wagon, his warning glance reminding her to stay quiet. "Mr. Quinn," he called out with false cheer, "I've brought your bride." Archer Quinn approached slowly, wiping his hands on a cloth. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said, his voice deep and even. "I canceled that arrangement months ago." Wilson's smile faltered only slightly. "Well now, that's unfortunate. But the agency never received any cancellation, and the contract was fulfilled. This here is Bethany, educated and ready to be a proper rancher's wife." Archer's gaze shifted to Bethany, his blue eyes assessing. She wanted to speak, to tell him the truth, but Wilson's warning kept her silent. Instead, she met his gaze steadily, hoping he might see something in her eyes that would make him suspicious. "I'm not interested," Archer said firmly. "You'll need to take her back." Wilson's friendly demeanor hardened. "Now, that's not how this works, Mr. Quinn. You paid half up front, and the rest is due upon delivery. The woman's traveled all the way from Chicago to be your wife. That's not my problem." The arrangement was canceled. As the men argued, Bethany noticed a folded piece of paper in Wilson's hand, a letter he'd prepared, supposedly from the bride agency, explaining who she was and why she'd been sent. The lie was there in black and white, ready to trap her. "Look," Wilson said, his patience clearly waning. "At least give her a chance. She's educated, can help with your books, raise children. Isn't that what you wanted?" Archer's expression remained impassive. "What I want is for you both to leave my property." Wilson's hand moved closer to his gun. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Mr. Quinn. You see, I've got expenses to cover. Either you honor the contract or what?" Archer cut him off, his own hand resting casually near his holster. The tension between the men was palpable. Bethany knew she had only moments before the situation escalated. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Mr. Quinn," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "may I speak with you privately for a moment?" Both men looked at her in surprise. "Please," she added, trying to convey with her eyes that she needed his help. Something in her expression must have reached him, because after a long moment, Archer nodded. "Wait here," he told Wilson, then gestured for Bethany to follow him to the porch of the main house, just out of earshot. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying," Archer said quietly once they were alone. "I don't need a wife, especially not one who arrives with a man like that." "He kidnapped me," Bethany whispered urgently. "I'm not a mail-order bride. I was traveling to San Francisco when he took me from the stagecoach. He's using me to collect money from you." Archer's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. That's quite a story. It's the truth. Please, you have to help me. He has a gun, and he's threatened to kill us both if I tell you who I really am. For a long moment, Archer studied her face, searching for deceit. Bethany held his gaze, willing him to believe her. Finally, he gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "Stay here," he said, then walked back to where Wilson waited by the wagon. Bethany couldn't hear what was said, but she saw Archer take the letter from Wilson's hand. He glanced at it briefly, then, to her astonishment, walked to a small fire burning in a nearby barrel where the ranch hands had been burning trash. Without ceremony, he dropped the letter into the flames. Wilson's face contorted with anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Archer turned back to him, his posture relaxed, but somehow more threatening for it. "She's perfect," he said loudly enough for Bethany to hear. "I'll keep her." Wilson's anger transformed into confusion, then calculation. "Well then," he said, recovering his composure, "there's still the matter of the final payment." "Of course," Archer said smoothly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch, tossing it to Wilson. "That should cover it. Now, get off my land." Wilson caught the pouch, quickly checking its contents. The gold coins seemed to satisfy him. With a final suspicious glance between Archer and Bethany, he climbed back onto the wagon. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Quinn," he called out, then snapped the reins and turned the wagon around. Bethany watched him go, scarcely believing it had been so easy. When the wagon had disappeared down the long drive, she turned to find Archer watching her. "He'll be back," Archer said matter-of-factly. "Men like that always are." "You believe me?" "I believe you're in trouble. Whether it's the kind you described remains to be seen." He gestured toward the house. "Come inside. You look like you could use some water and food." The interior of the house was surprisingly comfortable, not lavish, but well-built and clean, with solid furniture and a few touches that suggested permanence. Books on shelves, a clock ticking on the mantel, a quilt thrown over the back of a chair. Archer filled a glass with water from a pitcher and handed it to her.
"Drink.
Then talk." Bethany gratefully accepted the water, realizing how thirsty she was. After taking several long sips, she set the glass down and told him everything about the stagecoach robbery, Wilson's plan, and her own journey from Chicago. "I was going to San Francisco to take a position as a schoolteacher," she concluded. "My parents died last year, and there was nothing keeping me in Chicago. I wanted a fresh start." Archer listened without interruption, his expression giving away nothing of his thoughts. When she finished, he remained silent for a long moment. "Why did you burn the letter?" she asked finally. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I figured whatever was in it was a lie. Better to start fresh." "What happens now?" "Now," he said, standing, "we prepare for Wilson's return. He won't give up that easily. He knows I have money, and he knows you're alone here with me." "I'm not alone. You're here. One man against however many friends he brings back." Archer moved to a cabinet, unlocking it to reveal several rifles and pistols. "Can you shoot?" Bethany stared at the weapons. "My father taught me, but it's been years." Archer nodded, selecting a rifle and checking it methodically. "You'll need to remember quickly." "You're going to help me?" she asked, surprised by his immediate acceptance of her situation. He glanced up, his blue eyes meeting hers. "What would you suggest I do? Turn you out? Send you back to him?" "Most men would." "I'm not most men." He handed her the rifle. "It's loaded. The safety is on. We have a few hours before Wilson comes back with reinforcements, if he follows the pattern of men like him. That's enough time for you to remember which end is which." For the first time since the stagecoach robbery, Bethany felt a glimmer of hope. This stranger, this rancher, who had no reason to help her, was offering protection. But she was also keenly aware that she was still in a precarious position, alone on an isolated ranch with a man she knew nothing about. As if reading her thoughts, Archer said, "You can stay in the spare bedroom tonight. Tomorrow, once we're sure Wilson's not coming back, I'll take you to town. You can continue your journey from there." "Thank you," she said, meaning it deeply. Archer merely nodded, turning back to the gun cabinet. "Let's get you reacquainted with that rifle. We don't have much time." The next few hours passed in a blur of instruction. Archer was a patient teacher, showing her how to hold the rifle, how to aim, how to control her breathing. They practiced behind the house, shooting at bottles set up on fence posts. By late afternoon, Bethany had regained much of her childhood skill. "You're a natural," Archer commented as she hit her target 3 times in a row. "Your father taught you well." "He believed women should know how to protect themselves," she replied, lowering the rifle. "He would have liked you." A shadow crossed Archer's face. "I doubt that. Fathers rarely approve of men like me." Before she could ask what he meant, Thomas, the ranch hand she'd seen earlier, came running toward them. "Riders coming, boss," he called out. "Looks like 5 or 6 of them, all armed." Archer's expression hardened. "Get inside," he told Bethany. "Take position at the upstairs window. You'll have a clear view of the approach." Heart pounding, Bethany did as instructed, climbing the stairs to the 2nd floor. From the window of what appeared to be Archer's bedroom, she could see the road leading to the ranch. 6 riders approached slowly, Wilson in the lead. Even from this distance, she could see the determination in his posture. Downstairs, she heard Archer giving instructions to his ranch hands. There weren't many of them, just Thomas and 2 others who'd been working in the fields. 4 against 6, and Wilson's men looked like hardened criminals. Bethany checked her rifle, making sure it was loaded and ready. She'd never shot at a person before, but she knew she would if it meant protecting herself and the man who had so unexpectedly become her defender. The riders stopped about 50 yards from the house. Wilson dismounted, leaving his men on horseback as he approached alone. Archer stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, but pointed at the ground. "That's far enough," Archer called when Wilson was about 20 yards away. Wilson stopped, spreading his hands in a gesture of mock innocence. "Now, Mr. Quinn, is that any way to greet a business associate? I just came to check on the merchandise." "The lady isn't merchandise," Archer replied, his voice carrying clearly in the still afternoon air. "And our business is concluded." Wilson's friendly facade dropped. "I don't think so. See, I've been thinking about our arrangement and I believe I was underpaid. A woman like that educated, pretty she's worth a lot more than what you gave me." "She's not for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price." Wilson's hand moved closer to his gun. "But if you don't want to negotiate, maybe I'll just take her back. She and I had a good understanding before you interfered." From her position at the window, Bethany could see Archer's posture change almost imperceptibly, a slight shift of weight, a readiness that hadn't been there before. His voice, however, remained calm. "Last chance to leave peacefully, Wilson." Wilson's laugh was ugly. "You're outnumbered, Quinn. Be reasonable." "I'm being very reasonable. I'm giving you a chance to ride away alive." Wilson's hand moved for his gun, but Archer was faster. His rifle came up in one smooth motion, and he fired before Wilson had cleared his holster. The shot echoed across the yard, and Wilson stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. Chaos erupted. Wilson's men opened fire, bullets splintering the wood of the porch as Archer dove for cover. The ranch hands returned fire from positions around the yard, but they were indeed outnumbered. Bethany steadied her rifle against the window frame, aiming carefully at one of the mounted men who was about to shoot at Thomas. She took a deep breath, exhaled halfway, and squeezed the trigger. The man jerked in his saddle, dropping his gun as he clutched his arm. It wasn't a killing shot, but it was enough to take him out of the fight. The battle continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Bethany fired again and again, not always hitting her targets, but creating enough confusion to give Archer and his men an advantage. Despite her help, the situation was growing dire. One of the ranch hands was down, clutching his leg, and the others were running low on ammunition. Just when it seemed they might be overwhelmed, the sound of hoofbeats approached from the east. Bethany turned to see a group of riders galloping toward the ranch, at least a dozen men, all armed. "The neighbors," she heard Thomas shout. The Hendersons heard the shooting. Wilson's remaining men, seeing the approaching reinforcements, quickly lost their appetite for the fight. They grabbed Wilson, who was still conscious but bleeding heavily, and hauled him onto his horse. Within moments, they were galloping away, dust rising behind them as they fled. The Henderson riders slowed as they approached the ranch, their leader a gray-haired man with a weathered face raising his hand in greeting to Archer. "Thought you might need some help," he called out. "Heard the shooting from our north pasture." Archer stepped out from his position behind an overturned water trough. "Your timing is perfect, as always, Robert." As the men below sorted out what had happened, Bethany sagged against the wall beside the window, the rifle heavy in her trembling hands. The reality of what had just occurred, that she had shot a man, that people had nearly died, washed over her in a wave of delayed shock. She didn't hear Archer come up the stairs, only becoming aware of his presence when he gently took the rifle from her hands. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softer than she'd heard it before. She shook her head. "No, I'm fine." But the trembling wouldn't stop. Without a word, Archer sat beside her on the floor, his shoulder touching hers. He didn't speak, didn't offer empty reassurances, just sat with her as the adrenaline slowly drained away, leaving her exhausted. "You saved Thomas's life," he said finally. "Maybe mine too. I've never shot anyone before. I hope you never have to again." He glanced at her. "You did what was necessary. That's all any of us can do." The simple statement was oddly comforting. Not absolution, but acknowledgement that sometimes choices were made in difficult moments that could never be unmade. "Will they come back?" she asked. Archer shook his head. "Not anytime soon. Wilson was hit bad, and the Hendersons will spread the word about what happened here. No one will want to cross them. They're the largest family in the territory, with connections everywhere. What happens now?" "Now," he said, standing and offering her his hand, "we tend to the wounded, thank our neighbors, and figure out our next steps." Bethany took his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. "Our next steps? You're still planning to go to San Francisco, aren't you?" The question caught her off guard. In the chaos of the past few days, she hadn't thought beyond survival. I suppose so. That was the plan." Archer nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then tomorrow, we'll head to town and see about getting you passage on the next stage west." For some reason, the statement left her feeling strangely hollow. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on what needed to be done now. "Let me help with the wounded." The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. The injured ranch hand, a young man named Michael, had taken a bullet to his calf. It was a clean wound, and with Bethany's help, Archer was able to remove the bullet and bandage it properly. The Henderson riders stayed long enough to ensure no further threats were coming, then departed with promises to keep watch on the roads. By nightfall, an uneasy calm had settled over the ranch. Archer insisted Bethany take the spare bedroom, while he would sleep on a pallet in the main room, ready for any trouble. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Wilson's men, heard the gunshots, felt the kick of the rifle against her shoulder. Unable to lie still any longer, she rose and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, making her way quietly downstairs. To her surprise, Archer was still awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and a ledger open before him. He looked up as she entered. "Can't sleep?" She shook her head. "Too much on my mind." Without a word, he rose and poured her a cup of coffee, gesturing for her to join him at the table. It gets easier, he said as she sat. Not forgetting, but living with the memory. You sound like you know from experience. He didn't answer directly, instead closing the ledger and pushing it aside. I was a Union soldier. Cavalry. Saw things no man should see. Did things I'll carry with me always. The admission surprised her. Is that why you're out here? To escape those memories? A faint smile touched his lips. You can't outrun memories, Miss Keller, but you can build new ones to stand alongside them. They sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping their coffee. Despite the circumstances, Bethany found herself feeling oddly comfortable in his presence. Why did you come west? Archer asked eventually. The truth. Bethany considered the question. Freedom, I suppose. After my parents died, everyone had expectations for me to marry the banker's son, settle down, live the life my mother had lived. I wanted something different, something that was mine alone. And you thought you'd find that in San Francisco? I thought I'd find it anywhere but Chicago. She traced the rim of her cup with her finger. What about you? What brought you to Montana? Land, he answered simply. After the war, there wasn't much left for me back east. Came out here, worked cattle for other men until I saved enough to buy this place. Been building it ever since. Alone. His eyes met hers. Until now. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Bethany felt a flush rise to her cheeks and looked away, unsure how to respond. Archer cleared his throat. We should try to get some sleep. It's a long ride to town tomorrow. Bethany nodded, rising from the table. Good night, Mr. Quinn. Archer, he corrected. After today, I think we're well past formalities. Archer, she repeated, liking the way it fell on her tongue. Good night. Good night, Bethany. As she climbed the stairs back to her room, Bethany found herself wondering what it would be like to stay to build a life here, in this wild, beautiful country, with a man who had shown her nothing but respect and protection. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Sleep came easier after that, and when she woke, the sun was already high in the sky. She dressed quickly in the same blue dress, smoothing out the wrinkles as best she could, and made her way downstairs. Archer was on the porch, speaking with Thomas. He turned as she approached, and something in his expression made her heart skip a beat. Change of plans, he said without preamble. Thomas rode to town at first light. Wilson and his men were there, looking for you. They've got the stagecoach routes watched. Fear gripped her. What do? We wait. The territorial marshal is due in Copper Creek in 3 days. Thomas left word about what happened here. Once the marshal arrives, Wilson will be arrested, and you'll be safe to travel. 3 more days at the ranch. 3 more days with Archer. The prospect shouldn't have pleased her as much as it did. I don't want to impose, she began, but Archer waved away her concern. It's not an imposition. Besides, I could use your help. My help. He gestured toward the house. Those ledgers I was working on last night, they're a mess. Been trying to keep track of the ranch accounts, but numbers aren't my strong suit. Thought maybe you could take a look being a schoolteacher and all. The request was so practical, so normal amidst the chaos of recent events, that Bethany couldn't help but laugh. You want me to balance your books? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Unless you'd rather mend fences. I'll take the books, she said, smiling back. The next 3 days established a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Mornings, Bethany worked on the ranch accounts, organizing the chaotic system Archer had been using and creating a proper ledger. Afternoons, she helped with the cooking and lighter ranch chores, learning more about the operation from Thomas and the other hands. Archer was often busy with the cattle or training horses, but he made time each evening to sit with her on the porch, watching the sunset and talking. She learned about his family back east, parents long dead, a sister married to a lawyer in Boston, and his dreams for the ranch. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Chicago, her love of teaching, and her hope for a different kind of life. On the third day, as they sat on the porch watching the golden light fade from the distant mountains, Archer turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "The marshal should be in Copper Creek by now," he said. "We can head to town tomorrow if you'd like." Bethany felt a pang of something that might have been regret. "Yes, I suppose we should." Archer studied her face. "You still planning to go to San Francisco?" The question gave her pause. Was she? The past few days had shown her a different kind of life, harder in some ways than what she'd imagined in San Francisco, but also more real, more connected to the land and the passing of seasons. "I don't know," she admitted. "It seems like a lifetime ago that I set out on that journey." "You could stay," Archer said quietly. "Not as a mail-order bride or because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to." The offer hung between them, sincere and undemanding. Bethany looked at him, this man who had saved her, who had burned a letter rather than believe a lie about her, who had said simply, "She's perfect," when he could have turned her away. "What would I do here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever you want. Teach when the town builds a proper school. Help with the ranch. Build something of your own." He hesitated, then added, "Be with me, if that's what you decide you want." The simple honesty of his words moved her deeply. In the short time she'd known him, Archer Quinn had shown her more respect and given her more choices than any man she'd ever met. "I think," she said slowly, "I'd like to see where this leads. Not as your mail-order bride, but as myself, Bethany Keller, who happened to find her way to your door under unusual circumstances." Relief and something warmer spread across his features. "I'd like that too." The next morning, they rode to Copper Creek together. The marshal had indeed arrived and had already arrested Wilson on multiple charges, including kidnapping and attempted murder. Bethany gave her statement, confirming everything that had happened. "You're free to continue your journey now, Miss Keller," the marshal told her when they'd finished. "The stage to Virginia City leaves tomorrow, and from there you can connect to the line heading west." Bethany glanced at Archer, who stood quietly by the door of the marshal's office, his expression carefully neutral. She knew he wouldn't pressure her, wouldn't make any claims on her decision. "Thank you, Marshal," she said, "but I've decided to stay in the territory for a while. I understand Copper Creek might be looking for a teacher when the new school is built." The marshal looked between her and Archer, a knowing smile crossing his weathered face. "I believe they are at that. And I'm sure Mr. Quinn wouldn't mind having an educated woman nearby to help civilize that ranch of his." Archer's eyes met hers across the room, a question in them that she answered with a smile. They left the marshal's office together, stepping out into the bright Montana sunshine. "You're sure about this?" Archer asked as they walked toward the general store, where Bethany hoped to purchase some necessities. "I'm sure I want to see where it leads," she replied honestly. "The rest we'll figure out as we go." The summer passed in a haze of long days and warm evenings. Bethany found her place at the ranch, helping with the accounts, learning to ride properly, and even assisting with some of the cattle work. She moved into the spare bedroom permanently, though as the weeks passed and their relationship deepened, she found herself spending more and more evenings with Archer, talking late into the night. Their first kiss came on a warm July evening as fireflies danced in the gathering dusk. It was gentle and questioning at first, then deepening as they both acknowledged the feelings that had been growing between them. "I never expected you," Archer murmured against her hair as they sat together on the porch swing afterward. "Never thought someone like you would come into my life." "Someone like me?" "Someone strong enough to face down men with guns. Smart enough to organize my chaotic books. Brave enough to start over in a place like this." He tilted her chin up. "Beautiful enough to make me forget to breathe sometimes." Bethany laughed softly. "For a man who claims he's not good with words, you do all right." In August, construction began on Copper Creek's first proper schoolhouse, and Bethany was officially offered the position of teacher to begin when the building was completed in October. She accepted happily, pleased to return to the profession she loved while maintaining her life at the ranch. By September, there was no longer any pretense about separate bedrooms. Archer proposed one evening as they watched a spectacular sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. His words were simple and heartfelt, and Bethany accepted without hesitation, knowing she had found not just safety, but love and partnership in this wild country. They were married in October, just as the aspens turned golden in the high country. The ceremony was small but joyful, attended by neighboring ranchers, the townspeople of Copper Creek, and even Archer's sister, who traveled from Boston for the occasion. "He's different with you," Elizabeth Quinn Patterson told Bethany at the reception. "Happier than I've seen him since before the war. Whatever brought you to his door, I'm grateful for it." Bethany thought of the strange, twisted path that had led her here, the stagecoach robbery, Wilson's scheme, the gunfight at the ranch, and found herself, oddly, grateful too. Not for the fear and danger, but for the outcome that had brought her to this place, to this man. That night, as they lay together in what was now their bedroom, Archer traced the curve of her cheek with gentle fingers. "No regrets?" he asked. "About San Francisco?" Bethany shook her head. "None. This is where I was meant to be." She smiled, remembering something. "You know, I never did ask what was in that letter Wilson brought. The one you burned." Archer chuckled. "I never read it. Didn't matter what it said. The moment I saw you standing there, I knew everything I needed to know." "And what was that?" He kissed her softly. "That you were perfect, just as you are." Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Bethany divided her time between teaching at the new schoolhouse in town and helping run the ranch. The cold months were challenging but beautiful, the isolation tempered by the warmth they found in each other's company. By spring, Bethany had news that brought tears of joy to Archer's eyes. They would be welcoming a child by late autumn. As her body changed with the growing life inside her, Bethany found herself reflecting on the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked Archer one evening as they sat by the fire, his hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "If Wilson had never kidnapped me, if you hadn't believed me when I told you the truth?" Archer considered this, his face thoughtful in the firelight. "I believe some things are meant to be, though the path to them isn't always straight or easy. You were meant to find your way here, one way or another. Even if it took a kidnapping and a gunfight," she teased. He smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Even then, though I'd have preferred a less dangerous introduction." Their daughter was born on a crisp November morning, with Elizabeth Quinn Patterson in attendance to help the local midwife. They named her Grace, for the unexpected blessing she represented in their lives. As Bethany held her daughter for the first time, Archer at her side with wonder in his eyes, she knew with absolute certainty that all the fear and danger had been worth it. This life, this love was where she belonged. 5 years passed, bringing changes both to the ranch and to Copper Creek. The town grew steadily, attracting new businesses and families. The school expanded, and Bethany hired an assistant teacher to help with the growing number of students. The ranch prospered under their joint management, Bethany's head for numbers complementing Archer's practical knowledge of cattle and horses. Grace grew into a spirited child with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. She loved the ranch, following Archer everywhere and soaking up knowledge like a sponge. By the time she was 4, she could ride her pony confidently and knew the names of every animal on the property. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Archer surprised Bethany with a gift, the deed to a piece of land adjacent to the ranch, with a small cabin nestled in a grove of aspens. "What's this for?" she asked, puzzled. "Remember when you first decided to stay?" he said. You said you wanted to build something of your own. I thought maybe this could be a starter place for your school during the summer months, when the town school is closed. A place where children who live too far out to attend regular school might come and learn. Tears filled her eyes at his thoughtfulness. It's perfect. Thank you. Their kiss was interrupted by the patter of small feet as Grace burst into the room, followed by Elizabeth, who had moved to Montana permanently the previous year, claiming she preferred the fresh air to Boston smoke. Mama.
Papa.
Aunt Lizzie says there's cake. Laughing, Archer scooped up their daughter. There is indeed cake, little one. And presents, too. Later that night, after the celebrations were over and Grace was asleep, Bethany shared news of her own with Archer. Another child would join their family in the spring. His joy was palpable, his kiss deep and full of promise. I never thought I could be this happy, he murmured against her lips. Never imagined a life this full. Bethany thought of the day he had burned Wilson's letter and declared her perfect, not knowing her, not understanding the complications she would bring into his life, but choosing to help her anyway. It had been an act of faith, of courage, of belief in possibilities rather than limitations. I love you, she said simply, for seeing me as I am, for giving me the freedom to choose this life with you. I love you for choosing it, he replied, for seeing something worth staying for in a rough rancher and a remote piece of Montana. Outside, snow began to fall, the first of the season, blanketing the land in hushed white. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Bethany and Archer Quinn watched the flakes drift past their window, secure in the knowledge that they had found their true home not in a place, but in each other. Their second child, a son they named William, arrived on a bright spring morning. As the years passed, 2 more children joined the family, another daughter, Margaret, and a final son, Robert. The Quinn Ranch became known throughout the territory not just for its fine horses and cattle, but for the warm welcome extended to travelers and neighbors alike. Bethany's summer school in the Aspen Grove grew into a respected institution, drawing students from across the territory who stayed in the expanded cabin for weeks at a time, learning not just reading and mathematics, but practical skills for frontier life. Many of her former students went on to become teachers themselves, spreading education to even more remote communities. Archer continued to run the ranch, but as their children grew, he was able to delegate more responsibilities, allowing him time to serve on the territorial council, advocating for the rights of small ranchers against the encroachment of large cattle companies. His reputation for fairness and straight dealing made him a respected voice in local politics. Through it all, their partnership remained the foundation of everything they built. Each evening, no matter how busy the day had been, they made time to sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about their day, their dreams, their children. On their 25th wedding anniversary, with their children grown and the ranch more prosperous than ever, Bethany found Archer in his favorite spot on the porch, watching the sunset with a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, settling beside him, her hand finding his with the ease of long familiarity. "Just thinking about that day," he replied, his voice soft with memory. "The day Wilson brought you here. The day you burned his letter and said I was perfect." He smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "Best decision I ever made." Bethany leaned her head against his shoulder, thinking of all they had built together, the ranch, the school, the family, the love that had only deepened with each passing year. "Do you know," she said, "I still have nightmares sometimes about what might have happened if you hadn't believed me." Archer squeezed her hand. "But I did. And look at all that came from it." They sat in companionable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of their youngest son bringing in the horses for the night, the familiar rhythms of ranch life continuing around them. "We've had a good life, haven't we?" Bethany said finally. Archer turned to her. And in his eyes, she could still see the same love that had been there on their wedding day, on the days their children were born, through every triumph and challenge they had faced together. "The best," he said simply. "And it's not over yet." As if to emphasize his point, he pulled her into a kiss that held all the passion of their youth, tempered by the deep, abiding connection they had forged over a quarter-century together. And in that moment, Bethany knew with absolute certainty that the strange, frightening journey that had brought her to this place had been the greatest blessing of her life. Not because it had been easy or safe, but because it had led her to Archer Quinn, the man who had looked at her in the midst of danger and uncertainty and seen not a problem to be solved or a burden to be borne, but a woman worth fighting for, worth believing in, worth loving exactly as she was. Perfect, just as she was.